Thomas Merton was allowed eventually to live in solitude within the grounds of Gethsemane Abbey. And in that solitude he was able to reflect at length on the origins of the monastic life. He noted how the priesthood was not part of its charism. We have this quote from his pen: "The elders and all the monks dwelling in the desert of Siti came together in council and agreed that Father Isaac should be ordained priest to serve the church in that solitary place, where at stated days and hours the monks living in the desert come together for worship. That Abbot Isaac, hearing the decision that had been taken, fled to Egypt and hid himself in a field among the bushes, deeming himself unworthy of the honour of the priesthood. A large number of the monks set out after him to catch him. Now when they had stopped at evening in that same field to rest, weary with their journey, for it was now night, they turned loose the ass that carried their baggage, and let him eat grass. Now, while the ass was feeding, he came to the place where Abbot Isaac was hiding. And at daybreak, the monks, in search of the ass, came to that place where the old man had hidden himself. Marvelling at the dispensation of God, they seized him and were about to tie him up and take him prisoner and lead him away. But the venerable elder did not allow them, saying, "Now I can no longer oppose you, since it is perhaps the will of God that I, though unworthy, should receive priestly orders." That tendency to avoid anything which could lead to ministry outside the enclosure especially was maintained, and to this day strict monastic orders only ordain for the needs of their community or for the celebration of the sacred mysteries themselves, but ordaining therefore without giving faculties for other things, ordinatio ad missam. There has been an evolution in some congregations, and as a result some have got involved with pastoral work, but typically it is not for that a monk is ordained. St. Benedict himself was not ordained, and yet he had this charism of spiritual paternity. St. Anthony of Egypt was not ordained, and he, of course, par excellence, was a magnet and had that gift of engendering souls. We find it also in holy women in the desert, Mother Dorothea and so on. In the Middle Ages, there was a movement to ordain a greater number. Cluny was important in that development, and the celebration of private masses became popular. Hence, architecture too is affected, and abbey churches have lateral chapels and little chapels protruding from the main apse, as we had at La Trappe. The Camaldolese was initially a reform of the ancient order of Camaldoli by Blessed Paul Giustiniani, who was actually head there at Camaldoli itself, but it led to a split, led to the Coronese Camaldolis, still with us to this day. It started therefore at Monte Corona, the first independent house, and they also maintained the possibility of going towards reclusion, which was envisaged by St. Romuald, the founder of the Camaldolis. And they do not normally ordain. They might here and there, but tendentially those who are ordained before coming are useful to them, but they will ordain a future prior, of course, but they do not engage in all that much study. The Carthusians follow a different model. The Grand Camaldolis do ordain, and they have got involved with quite a lot of ministry outside in recent times. The Carthusians never have, but they have ordained the choir monks, and that was fairly close to the origin. The lay brothers secure the running of the monastery, but the choir monks live purely a life of almost uninterrupted prayer in solitude, each with his house, which is actually fairly close to the model of the Lavra in Egypt and the monastic East in general. We find therefore a link with Mount Athos, and also actually with the Celtic West. Cells, individual, and the monastic church. Ordination does happen in the Carthusian order, but the faculties are given only for the celebration of Holy Mass itself. And they never, ever confess women. And it would not be even valid if they did so. The faculties are just not given, ever, to confess women. So it would be actually not only illicit, but invalid. And only a few will receive the faculties for confession anyway. They will be the confessors of the community. But they do maintain a daily individual celebration. Since the Second Vatican Council, there was the possibility of a concelebration on a Sunday. The Carthusian order, of which we think on this day, feast day of its founder, St. Bruno, has not lost that element of Eastern spirituality coming into the desert of the West. It's actually still there in the Consuetudines, in the Book of Customs, which essentially is their rule. It says in the prologue that our fathers followed an oriental light, a light from the East, and one finds that. There is an Eastern feeling to it, a certain radicality. The very long offices, unpruned, entirely sung. Strangely enough, even certain elements of liturgy, such as the full-length thurible, used in a very complicated way, but that goes right back. Life in a Carthusian cell has the advantage of being cushioned from the world and with no means whatsoever of being contacted. No question at all of a telephone or anything modern. Books and silence. Prayer rhythmed by the bell. And therefore The effect on the soul is profound. The only interlocutor is the Lord of hosts there present. There is no possibility of leaving the cell and therefore of making Eucharistic adoration or even a visit to the Blessed Sacrament. It's not allowed. And so one has one's little oratory with no Blessed Sacrament there, but only a place of prayer. But it's called l'oratoire, the oratory. It's like a choir stall with a crucifix in front. And there it all happens. There are ancient, quaint customs, such as prostrations. One is often prostrate either in choir or before the altar. And that's something that to some extent I've maintained here as well, alone. The Carthusian mode of prostration. It's done on one elbow. It actually is rather like the position that St. John the Beloved took on the Lord's breast at the Last Supper. One rests on the Lord. There is a problem in the Carthusian life which is felt at times, and that is that because of the absolute nature of the solitude, there is the obligation to have a weekly walk and also a short encounter on Sunday afternoon. And that is the point of leakage of much energy and distraction. And I remember always finding that that was an element which hurt the soul to some extent, which desired to be alone and forgotten, because talking obliges one to talk about what one knows, and all one knows is the past, and therefore the past comes back to the present rather unnecessarily. And I remember oftentimes yearning for the perpetual silence, the silence perpétuel of La Trappe, where one didn't even know the surname of one's brother in the novitiate. Certainly the life story was unknown. Each was hidden in God. There was an aura of mystery about the head of each, and one didn't need to know. The only one that knew the heart was Jesus, and one was hidden in him, hidden even from one's brethren. A small amount of recreation is a large aperture through which one betrays oneself, and many things are said which perhaps were left better unsaid. But I remember one day thinking about all this, and a little yearn came of hiraeth, that's longing, nostalgia in Welsh, and I wrote this, summing it all up with regard to actually what the Desert Fathers had themselves in Egypt. Complete and utter reclusion of soul, enveloped in the heart of Jesus and unknown to men. After night office, the voice of prayer is ever heard on high. I sleep, but others keep the lamp alive. My resting lungs now heave a little sigh, as slowly it strikes on from 4 to 5, as they recall how each unthinking beat calls forth the brethren to those stalls that knew a gyrovag, who in his youthful heat from cloister unto cloister madly flew, and fell in love too often with that love that did without a word reverberate in those arched tunnels through which e'en now move those hooded mysteries that contemplate. La Trappe, I fell too early in thy jaws. The Hiraeth for my home, mine inwards gnaw.